Hello, and welcome to another edition of Devlin's Pirate Radio Show. And I don't know, it seems like we're starting a brand new show today because, it's episode 101, and it seems like, I don't know, we're moving to the next 100. There's going to be some subtle changes in here. You probably already noticed a couple. But overall, it's going to stay the same show. You're going to get me at my best, at my worst. Fun-loving, a little deep sometimes, very kooky. And I'm going to continue bringing on co-hosts that I find interesting and just like to hang out with these people. And that's pretty much all you're going to see, more of the same. We are going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to talk more on the pop culture side in at least one segment a day. I kind of stopped doing that after Mondo Nostalgia was created and only did a little bit where I reviewed movies and talked about favorite TV shows or just had a little bit of fun with pop culture. I'm going to do that now in every episode because I used to do that way back when we started. But as much as I love Mondo Nostalgia, I miss talking about it on the radio where I have a little bit more time than when I used to do it in the little cam videos I used to put out. So besides that, you're going to get other things. And basically me. I didn't know how to start this episode, but I decided I wanted to do a little thing about reading people. Because it's actually become almost a dying art because we rely so heavily on texting and emailing and just, we don't really, we do meet up, but there are a lot of relationships that are based totally, or not totally, but a lot, on like emailing and stuff like that and texting. And so a lot of people say that it can be a problem because sometimes you just can't, read how they said something. Because we've all had it. We've all had it where we get a text or an email and we read a line that could be read like 2-3 different ways. And I don't know about you, but sometimes is that sarcastic? I usually go for sarcastic first. And then when I reread it, oh, no, I don't think it is. I think that's just the way to put it. But I found little skills that I've known. I don't know where I got this, but I have to admit, I'm really good at reading people. Now, I've always had this skill, and I don't know where I got it from. I don't know if my parents, it's a hereditary thing. It just seems like a weird thing to be hereditary. But what I really wanted to talk about is how there are little ways that I've noticed that just by the way people talk and stuff. Now, this goes a little bit with episode, I think, 99. I talked about untruths. And I'm starting to realize how people are doing this. Now, if you asked me back in my 20s if I was good at reading people, I'd say no. Even though deep down inside, I knew I was. But I didn't have that ego enough to say, yeah, I think I can. But now as I'm getting closer and I'm up a little bit of ways from 50, I'm going to admit that I can read people really well. I can read people, I can read situations, and I can even read lines in emails and texts that sometimes the way people phrase things, I think, make it, there's a reason for it. Because I know when I write emails and texts, I watch exactly, and I think even when people are doing quick texts, but they're trying to say something substantial, I think they deliberately pick certain words and stuff. Now, in no way are you going to be able to learn from this. Hopefully, maybe a little bit. But in no way am I trying to say that I'm skilled enough to teach this stuff. But I'm going to give you some examples of things I've noticed in my life. I will not name names, so people are getting a little nervous out there. I'm a class act. And in no way am I saying I'm 100% right. I actually like when I'm wrong, especially if it's a bad situation. And, I like when I'm wrong. Like if you meet somebody, they always say that when you meet somebody, your first impression of them doesn't always say what's true. Like you might say, wow, I don't like her. I don't like him, or I really like that guy. But then when you get to know them, you start seeing another side to them. And I've had situations where, when I meet somebody, I instantly feel a chemistry. And then after I get to know them a little bit, there's times that you just don't, I don't know, I think I might have been wrong on that. Or the same, you meet somebody and you're like, oh, they rubbed me the wrong way already. And then you get to know them and realize, oh, they might have been having an off day. Maybe you were having an off day. But the thing I always keep in mind is keep that first instinct, because it may actually come into play later. Example, I have met people that have won me over after initially thinking they weren't nice people. But they've come around and showed that side several times again, so that they could be still nice people, but keep that initial feeling. Because when they're actually meeting somebody the first time and they're not afraid to kind of let their abrasive side show, that's probably going to tell you that you're in for something. Or if you like them immediately, they might be having a rough spell after a bit, and there's, a thing. Keep that initial thing in the back of your mind, but don't let it dominate, who you're going to be. That's a little tip right there. Okay, my first example is reading things the way people say, okay? And this is like in emails and stuff. Now, I've got a friend who's going to be leaving soon. They're leaving for, a couple of years on a great adventure. Again, I'm not going to name names, though, if they're listening to this. But see, that's the other wonderful thing. I know my closest friends probably do not listen to this show. So even I could spell it out. Only the odd occasion will somebody say, hey, you were talking about me. But anyhow, they're leaving for a couple of years. Now, I recently got an email saying, it's going to be hard saying goodbye to you. Now, I'm making it sound very final, even though they said. Now, in the email, nowhere in the email does it say I'm wrong about it only being the year or two that they may be gone. So right there, I'm thinking, oh, so, I like the honesty in this because of the fact, because we don't know what could happen. In those 2 years, I could die, they could die. They could find somebody that makes them stay there, or a situation that makes them stay there. So I like at least that they're not lying to me about saying, oh, come on, I'll be back in no time and things will be great. So I respect that. But what even gets me even more is in the letter I read, I'll never forget you. Now, I take this to heart. Now, this one, it's sincere, it's to the point, but once again, it does not say we'll always be friends. It's not a promise that we're always going to be friends. This, in fact, says there's a possibility we could lose track of one another. Does this make me sad? Yes, it does. But I also give it respect because they're not giving me the lines that normal people would give you, like, oh, we're still going to stay close. I like that. Now, recently, I spent time with this person where we had a lot of people around. And a lot of people were congratulating him, telling him that he's got some great adventures. And I am really proud of him. He's worked hard for this and deserves this. I know this is one of his dreams. So don't get me thinking that I'm such a horrible person. Yes, there is a selfish side that wants to keep him here. I love the guy. But it's not going to happen. But anyhow, during this, I would listen to little pieces of conversation. And I always noticed it was the people that he talked to that would mention, well, you'll be back in a year or two, you'll come back and stuff like that. But I noticed that he was very careful not to commit to anything like that either. A few times, he may have slipped and said, yeah, well, I'll be back for visits and stuff. All very true. But anyhow, this is ways you can read it. I could have easily read that email and said, oh yeah, he'll only be gone for a little bit. But because I noticed the line, I'll never forget you, that's a final statement in my eyes. So I read that and I take that and put it around. Now, I've talked many times about being at weddings where I was in wedding parties where people basically told me what I wanted to hear. Now, at the time, I took it for religion because, hey, foolish me, I actually believe that when people tell me something, it's going to be true. Well, I silly me for thinking that, but these people never followed through. Just words they were telling me, and I'm going to learn that. In fact, I've actually stopped people when they were going to tell me something that, I remember being with a friend who was talking to me about, basically about, I'm at a loss for words here. They were talking to me about, well, I'll be there for you at any time. I'll be there for you. You could call me at any time and I'll be there for you. And if I'm not, I'll get back to you. And I stopped them. I stopped them right there and I said, no, you're saying too much here and it's not true. And they said, how could you say it's not true? Well, a couple of weeks later, I actually did call them. Didn't even get a response or a call back. Didn't even get a mention. Sorry, I missed your call. And so I'm glad I stopped them because I understand they're pretty words to say I'll be there for you anytime, but that's what they are. They are pretty words. And you've got to read people because my head now tells me, no, those are just words. They're words. They do not mean anything to me. You can see it in their body language that they are trying to make you feel better and they will use anything to make you feel better. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And some people don't necessarily know they're doing it. Maybe they truly mean they want to be there for you, but can't. But I'm getting to the point, I don't need that kind of stuff anymore. I want some real truths. Now, another situation where I read people, well, this one was an easy one, but again, no names mentioned, but I'm going to be very detailed. But I know this person doesn't listen to the show, so I'm all good. Basically, I was with one of my best friends, known him forever, and I was with another friend, another great friend, and we were all walking to the movies. Now, a misunderstanding happened that nobody was actually to blame for. One person mentioned they would be here to meet at a certain time. The other person mentioned they were leaving at a certain time. Never did it say that those two times could cross. In fact, it was implied that there was no possible way that the one could meet for the time. Now, I'm really good if there's a specific time set. But when I say I am leaving my place at this time, and we all know that it's going to take more than a half hour for me to get there, don't expect me to be there in a half hour. Anyhow, the misunderstanding went, and as we were walking, I made a sort of comment about, well, who knows, one day I might just not be here. At that time, the friend who was a little upset said, don't get my hopes up. When I looked over at them, their body movement, basically, I just gave a glare and made a comment like, well, isn't that nice to hear from one of your best friends? Don't get my hopes up. Kind of excited about the fact that I could possibly not be on this day. Well, isn't that just what anybody would want to hear? Now, when I looked at them, they gave me that, when dogs do something wrong and they know it? That's the look I got. In fact, they wouldn't even really make eye contact with me. And if they did, it was kind of like the head down, eyes up. So anyhow, I let it go. I decided I didn't want to deal with that. I let it go in my own way. I also kind of kept that person a little bit distant. My friend couldn't believe what had happened, and so she decided that she wanted to do some investigating, thinking, well, maybe he didn't hear you. And I said, trust me, I read that person, and I could tell you knew exactly that's what he said, that's what he heard. When she asked him, she said, are you going to apologize for that? He said no. So he chose to play the what's the card? Like the nothing happened card. I'm going to call like nothing happened. And I acted like nothing happened. But in my head, I decided, you know what? I don't need that in my life anymore. I'm getting a little tired of people I have been there through thick and thin treating me like dirt. So now whenever that happens, I'll take the high road, but that also means I can distance myself a little bit from you until I'm officially over it. Does that sound like me playing games? It might, but you know what it sounds like to me? Somebody who's protecting their heart. I'm not going to be that way to people who are just going to take advantage of me. I know what I bring to the table in a friendship. So finding ways to read people, like just knowing, okay, they knew they made a mistake, but they're not going to own up to it. I have another friend that recently we had a situation where we weren't talking or just were curt to one another and stuff like that. I had a lot to do in it. I had a lot to do with it, and I took responsibility for my part in it. Now, the person dealt with what had happened, but I had noticed that they didn't really take responsibility for their act. In fact, they never even brought it to attention. Now, that could have meant they felt they did nothing wrong, but it also kind of was a little bit of a slap to my face because of the fact that, I don't know, when two people are both in the wrong and one admits they're in the wrong and the other one can't do it, well, that's Bill's thing. And another way to read people. Did they take responsibility for their part? When I know I've done something wrong, if I'm curt with somebody, I will quickly think about it. And as soon as I say, no, it's in my head, it wasn't right, I will apologize for my actions. But if you notice that other people don't, that is a way of reading someone, because this is something that you don't have to put up with. There's lots of ways to catch body movement and to read things. Now, I'm not trying to say with every email you have to aggressively look for something, because that's obsessive. But if you read something in a text or in an email that sounds a little off or weird or, wow, why did they say it like that? There could be reason for it, and it's something to look into. You deserve better, and if people are not treating you in the right way, then you don't have to stick up for it. You don't have to be around and move on to the next person. I'm not saying to judge it. If you question any of it, ask them point blank. Is there a reason you phrased it that way? Don't become obsessive. Some people read into every little thing. That's not what I'm saying to do. It's just those little phrases and stuff that just seem odd. And, you don't need to put up with that. You know what you bring to the table. And if people aren't bringing the same thing to the table, is this really somebody you want in your life? Now, I admit we all have bad days, so I am the first person not to give up on someone so quickly. I give them several chances. But if I notice reoccurring themes, keep that in your mind, because they will come up again. And if they realize that it was a problem, they'll fix it. They'll change it, and then you might never see it again. But if you see this continually happen, it's going to happen. Anyhow, I don't know if that taught you anything. Just might be me spewing my own thing. I'm going to look at a really old movie when we come back in our Mondo Nostalgia segment. I'm going to look at a movie from 1939 that Mike and I got to rewatch over the Valentine's Day weekend. Gone with the Wind. Yeah, some of you are already like, oh, it's so old and outdated. But I still think it's an amazing movie. Excuse me. Burping there. I still think it's an amazing movie. And I'm going to talk about it next. Welcome back. I'm Devlin, and I'm going to talk about, as I said, a really old movie. And before you youngins turn the page, if you say you're a movie fan, you should go back and watch the classics. And Gone with the Wind certainly is a classic. It was a Best Picture winner in 1939 and was a real cultural phenomenon at the time. The reason I'm talking about this movie is because Mike and I finally got a chance to see it. Now, I've actually seen Gone with the Wind several times. I saw it my first time as a kid. I was lucky enough to see it at the Broadway Theater, and they showed it, and I got to see it on the big screen. And as I said, I've probably talked about the Broadway Theater. Thank you for that theater, for giving us such classic movies like that to actually see, because most of the time you'd only see it on, VHS or when it was on TV. Now, I remember watching it after the fact on TV. And Gone with the Wind is a long movie. I think it runs in at like 4 hours something. It's one of the longest movies ever made. And I remember when you watched it on TV, they'd either break it down into 2 nights, or they'd like start this thing at 7 and you'd still be up at 1 because they put so many commercials in it. But I've seen this movie several times. I even remember sharing this with my Heather's Corda, her brother, and he watched it. And I remember his parents were shocked when Eric mentioned, yeah, I saw Gone with the Wind. Devlin showed me Gone with the Wind. You got him to sit through Gone with the Wind? And he goes, yeah, and I think he enjoyed it. And they were just like flabbergasted because it is a long movie and it's not action-packed. It is, of course, based on a book by Margaret Mitchell, and it was made into a gorgeous, gorgeous movie in 1939. Mike had never seen it, so that's why I suggested we watched it. We watched it in 2 nights, and he actually really liked it. He's seen most of the big parts, but he's never seen it all together, so he really enjoyed it. I knew he would, because he likes those over-the-top, soapy romances, and that's exactly what Gone with the Wind was. Now, if you have never seen Gone with the Wind, it might not be your cup of tea, but honestly, if you're a movie fan, you should check it out just for its technical astonishments. Mike and I were watching this, and I remember looking over to him, and I said, every scene in this movie could be a collector's plate, because it just looks so beautiful, and Mike just laughed, thinking that was the most absurd thing he heard. It follows the story of Scarlett O'Hara, a Southern belle who, is a spoiled little rich girl living on the land. And basically, you see her with the Civil War and stuff happening. And you see as she grows up to a woman and the things she has to do to save her beloved Tara, which is her family land, which her father tells her land is the most important thing. Sorry, I'm not trying to recreate the movie. I just got into a little Southern there when I was saying it. Now, if you ever want a good time, check out some of the documentaries about Gone with the Wind, because this movie was like, the book was so popular that when they decided to make it a movie, the people behind it almost went nuts trying to get this adaptation done. Everything led to controversy, and it's surprised that this movie even got done. The movie, of course, so yeah, check out those documentaries. Sometimes you get them on the Blu-rays or the DVDs, and they're just as entertaining to watch just because of how much trouble they had. And I believe David Selznick, I think his name is, the producer, almost went mad getting this to the big screen just because of how many fights and battles he had to do. The book was so beloved that, the fans just wanted them to get it right. And the first big problem was Scarlett O'Hara. So many people wanted this role, and when they cast Vivien Leigh, people were in an uproar because she was a British actress, and she wasn't a proper Southern belle. She wasn't even American. But they believed Vivien Leigh was perfect for the role. When you see it, she is so perfect for the role. Clark Gable was under contract by another company, so getting him was like pulling nails, but like pulling teeth. They just couldn't pulling nails. Anyhow, he didn't really want to do the part, and they knew he was the best person for the part, and they eventually got him, and they probably promised him a lot of stuff to get him there because he really didn't want to do it, even though it became probably one of his most, loved characters, Rhett Butler. And yeah, watch the Trials and Tribulations. When the movie finally opened, it was a major success. In fact, they say that if you changed how much a ticket cost to today's prices, Gone with the Wind would still be up amongst the top thing. Right now it's not, because of the fact that it was so, the ticket prices were so cheap. But with inflated prices, Gone with the Wind is still up there with Star Wars and some of the other big movies. You can check that out online after you listen to this show. It was a success, and even the fans said Vivian Lee did the role right. There's a lot of controversy, of course. A lot of people say the movie is outdated. I don't, because I believe it's of its time. Of course, they deal with slavery in this. Scarlett's family and pretty much every rich person in this movie has black slaves. And although you don't see them as mistreated, what I like about Gone with the Wind is although they are caricatures, so some people may have a hard time with that because they are kind of black stereotypes. I like that they're kind of ingratiated in the family. They're like Butterfly McQueen actually went on to win an Oscar and was the first black actress to win an Oscar. And what I find amazing about it is that there's common lines about how she basically raised Scarlett and her sisters, and they're treated more like part of the family. So even though there's a couple times you might see them getting smacked, this isn't one of those 12 years a slave we're going to see just beatings. A lot of these people are very endeared to the family and stuff. But still, I know it's an issue when people watch it now, but I think of it as a slice of life. This is what life was like. And yeah, and I know that's one of its issues. I know a lot of problems say it looks really out of date, but you know what? It still looks pretty gorgeous. When you see all the extras that they used for like when the war hits Atlanta and you see all the casualties laying there. It's just a mesmerizing way they filmed it because Scarlett just walks out on the street. Then they pan back the camera and you notice that there's more and more injured and dead, more and more. And it's just an amazing scene. As I said, it's so beautifully filmed. Now, it is very soap opera-ish, and a lot of people think the acting is very over the top. I know a lot of people say they can't watch old movies because the acting's over the top. What I like about old movies for myself is that I think movies are getting to the point where it's like, oh, it's too realistic, And I kind of miss that fantasy aspect where we know we're watching a movie, where even like things are, and we still get it. Don't get me wrong. There are still movies that I go into and come out thinking, oh, that was a nice feel. But now when you see like, oh, superhero movies have to be so gritty now and everything like that, I still like movies with the fantasy aspect, and Gone with the Wind is full of that. There's so much soap opera things in it. I can see why it was so beloved. And it kind of ends on a cliffhanger, so be warned that it does. Now, they eventually wrote a sequel to the book. It wasn't Margaret Mitchell. As far as I know, Margaret Mitchell didn't write anything. She might have wrote a couple of other things, but I always thought this was like one of her, like she did one and that's it. But don't quote me on that. I don't know my book lore as well as I know my movie lore. But anyhow, they rewrote it in the 90s, I believe, and apparently, I've talked to some people who are Gone with the Wind fans. They said it was actually well written, as in the same style. And because Scarlett's still fairly young when the story continues, it makes sense to continue the story. And as I said, I've talked to some people who read it and they thought it was really good. What wasn't really good is the miniseries that they did on TV with Joanne Whaley Kilmer. Yes, she starred as Scarlett and Timothy Dalton as Rhett Butler, and apparently, they just didn't have the same kind of chemistry that we got from Vivian and Clark. So, but anyhow, they continued the story, and we got to see a little bit more of the craziness that is their love. Now, I always like to watch it around Valentine's Day. I also think it's a good time because the Oscars are coming up, and Gone with the Wind is such a Oscar, like it won so many Oscars when it came out, and even though some people say it's a little over the top, but again, it's one of those movies that if you look at what it is, like the colors in this are they just blow you away. I got to see this on Blu-ray for the first time, and it was just magical to see the restoration they did on this. And the burning of Atlanta is, it's blue screen and a little cheesy. But when you think of that spectacle happening in 1939, it's pretty incredible. And look for the giant gateway. because I always heard that that was the gateway that King Kong came out of a couple years prior, and they needed things to burn to make it look like Atlanta was burning, and so they burned the King Kong set at Gone with the Wind. But I like watching it around Valentine's Day, even though some people say, well, it's not really a Valentine's Day movie. And I go, no, it is. Because Rhett and Scarlett have such a love-hate relationship that it's almost this perfect relationship because, Scarlett is in love with another man, Ashley, who she can't get out of her mind. Clark Gable's Rhett is in love with Scarlett, but he's also a scoundrel. So he's like... What I like is he's kind of like reminds me of a Han Solo in a sort of way. I always thought Han Solo must have had a little Rhett Butler in him because he'd always hang out at the whore houses and he would always play, gamble, and he'd be very blunt with the women and spoke honestly where the other men were always careful to be gentlemen. And, he picks out real early that Scarlett is not like other ladies, that she can get down and dirty when she has to, and he's not afraid calling her out, and she hates that because she still wants to be seen as strong but demure, but he'll call her out any way possible, and that's what makes the relationship work. So I do believe it's a Valentine's Day movie because it's such a love-hate relationship. You're kind of hoping they'll get together, but it's just they're together, they're not, they're together, they're not. And to see Scarlett, I always laugh when people say that there's not a lot of good female lead movies. And I realized in 1939 we had two that I can think of, and I'm sure there was more. The Wizard of Oz, which Dorothy is most definitely the lead, and Gone with the Wind, which is definitely Vivien Leigh's movie. It is all about Scarlett O'Hara, and she's on screen the majority of the time. And some people think, well, Scarlett O'Hara is not really a good role model, but she is. This is a woman that, yes, does things that are questionable, but she's a survivor. At the beginning, we don't think she can survive a picnic. If she gets heartbroken, she throws a hissy fit. And as the movie continues, we get to see her evolve into this strong, powerful woman where she's 1 minute working in the fields and the next, cutting up curtains so she can try to seduce a new husband so she can actually make some money for her land again. It's unscrupulous, the things she does. And that's what I think makes Scarlett a strong character, is because of the fact that she is a survivor. Yes, she's the first to admit that, yes, I have done some things I'm not proud of, but if it leads me to prosperity, I think there's a line in the movie that says, I know what hunger is, and I'm never going back without a life without money. And yes, I think she is strong. And I think people should get something out of that. And I think Gone with the Wind is a wonderful movie. If you take it for what it is, very whimsical now, very soap opera-ish, forget that there are scenes that, might be a little questionable. The movie runs over 4 hours, I believe, and it never has a dull moment. I've seen movies that run an hour and a half that I go to the theater now, and there's moments that I'm like, oh, this is awful. Gone with the Wind flies. Now, we watched it in 2 parts recently, but I've seen it in 4-hour installments. I've seen it on TV with commercials and sat through it. It runs beautifully, and that's the thing. It constantly entertains, and you constantly, unless you haven't ever read the book, you'd never know the next plot twist because it's so well done. I think it's a beautiful film. I stand by every scene looks like a collector's plate. And I joke about that because Gone with the Wind has a huge amount of collector's plates. In fact, it's probably up there with The Wizard of Oz as one of the earliest cult films. Now, when I say cult films, Gone with the Wind was a hit. Wizard of Oz wasn't. But I'm saying that it's a movie that has spawned so much memorabilia. You can go online and you can find Scarlett O'Hara dolls and you can dress her in all the wonderful costumes. And the costumes in here are just absolutely to die for. There's also, collector's plates up the wazoo. In fact, there is so many of them. We get them a lot of times through Value Village, and Once they show up, they're gone almost instantly. There's like recreations of scenes in the movie that you can buy like dioramas for and stuff. So this stuff actually became popular even before, we got into like the science fiction toys like Planet of the Apes and Star Trek and that, because people just adore this movie so much and it's worthy of it. You should also check YouTube. I think it'd be on YouTube. Carol Burnett does an amazing parody of Gone with the Wind. That is just got one of the best lines ever in it. I won't spoil it for you, but it mocks the classic scene where Scarlett desperately needs to get a husband, but realizes she just doesn't have the beautiful clothes she once did. So her and Mammy get to work on turning the curtains into an incredible dress. And Carol Burnett's line is just so incredible. You should check it out because I won't do it justice. But it's a great parody, and it also shows you just how important this film is. I know a lot of people diss it, and I don't know why. Especially with the Academy Award time coming up, you should go out and rent as many of the best picture films as you can, because it basically takes us to a time where movies like this could win. Movies that were number one at the box office, but also looked visually great. Some people might question why it won, but honestly, I think there's so much here. As I said, it looks absolutely beautiful. The costumes are incredible. The performances are wonderful. It's just a big old fun time at the movies. It's got classic, frankly, Scarlett, I don't give a damn. Tomorrow is another day. It's got catchphrases. This may not be your typical Comic-Con movie, but it would be so great to go to a convention and see somebody dressed up as Scarlett O'Hara, one of the original cosplay characters. And just be wonderful to see those lavish balls with the ballroom gowns with the hoops in them. And it's a great film, and you'll have a lot of fun with it. And I think you'll see the technical wonder on why it won so. But with the Academy Awards coming up, fill yourself up with some of those classic ones. Maybe do a couple a year. And Gone with the Wind's a perfect one to start with. So hopefully I've inspired you to either check it out or revisit it for those of you who have seen it already. I know I saw it. I can't wait to see it again. It is such a classic. Anyhow, I'm going to take a short break, and when I come back, I'm going to talk a little seriouser, but I'm going to talk about another movie, but, well, it's hard to explain. Stay tuned, and you'll find out what I'm going at with this. And we're back, and I'm feeling good today. I don't know why. I just am enjoying chatting with you, and I hope you're enjoying listening to me. Right now, I want to talk about a very serious topic. In fact, I might be hitting places that I've always said I'm not going to go. And the reason I'm going to is because this is an important topic to me. It's just there are certain parts of my life I never thought I would talk about, but I'm going to just hint at them. And again, the reason I'm going to is because I know the people who truly are close to me don't listen to this show. So it's not going to surprise me, and a lot of those people already know about this. But I'm going to talk about it. Now, I'm calling this segment 50 Shades of Devlin because of the fact that it has a lot to do with the movies 50 Shades. Now, I've never read the books, and my full review of this movie will come next week when I review the movies I saw in February. That was one of the ones I saw. So we'll do that all like I do every other month lately. But I saw 50 Shades Darker, the second in the series. Now, I actually really like the first one, and I like the second one a lot, but I'm starting to see subplots that I didn't know really were dealt with. And it actually kind of saddens me now to see how many people are against this movie and book series. All I ever heard about this movie is it deals with S&M and the dark side and going too far. But there's a major subplot that I think is probably the most important part of the film. When I went into these movies, I really felt these movies were going to be about the female lead, Anastasia Steele, and the coming of age story. But as I watched them, I actually find myself really entranced by Christian Grey. Now, when I say entranced, it's not just like, oh, he's good looking and, ooh, I like that he does sexy things to her. It's not like that at all. There's a little bit of that, but most of it is the fact that these movies are really about him. But the thing that saddens me is how many people hate on these movies. And a lot of them hate on these movies because they've never seen them. That makes it even worse. But the major subplot, and I would almost say that it's a big part of the movie, is the fact that Christian Grey was physically, emotionally, and sexually abused as a child, and people are writing this off as a nothing movie. The more I see the movies, the more I'm seeing how important this plays out, because the movies are more about a man who's dealing with that dark past more than the sexual bondage. This movie has become so real in some ways to me, and I hate the fact that people are writing it off as fluff. If this was a movie about a woman that was dealing with the sexual, physical, and emotional abuse that she got as a child, it would probably, even if it was considered a fluff movie, still get some admiration for the fact that it is dealing with a woman trying to deal with this. Because it's a man trying to deal with this, it's being written off as not important. And that's what saddens me about this. And this is what's going to make me stronger because I have seen these movies. Here's the part where I say things I'm never going to talk. I guess I should never say never, because eventually you never know where your life's going to take you. I am a man who knows a little bit about being abused as a child. I won't go into if it was physically, emotionally, sexually, but I actually see Christian Grey, and I actually am intrigued more. He knows he's damaged. Many times you have heard me use the word damaged to describe myself. He knows he's a freak. Many times I have described myself as a freak. Christian Grey is actually doing more for me than society ever has. And it saddens me that once again, because it's a man, we are not taking this movie seriously. This man admits his past is probably the reason he has become the man he is. But no, it's not important because he's a man. Recently, one of my favorite critics even gave this a 0, as in there is nothing in it of value. I'm sitting here thinking this movie could change my life and the way I see myself because I'm seeing a man dealing with something that I never get to see. When I was young, I actually called a self-help line to talk about the abuse that I had had in my past. I was told I was a boy and there was nothing they could do about it. I was basically told it didn't matter. It doesn't affect you like girls do. And now, here's a major motion picture that is being written off as it's all about the S&M. It's all about the sexy erotica. And I'm watching a movie about a man who's trying desperately to find love, but knows damn well that he's probably not capable of it. If you've listened to any of my 100 episodes, I'm sure many times you have heard me think that I do not believe I deserve the love that I get from people. That's not from me just being like trying to get attention. That's from stuff that I dealt with when I was younger. Why I choose not to talk about it is why many people choose not to talk about it. I believe I have overcome it the best way I can. I know people are going to say, but you could get psychiatric help. You could get, you know what? I have seen people that have gotten years of psychiatric help and still act as if they're victims. I am a survivor. I am a survivor of this. I have told the closest people to me, and they know. I am talking about it openly now, but I'm not talking too much detail because that's my personal demons and that's my personal thing to deal with. Even the people I'm closest to that I've talked about this, I have not described details or named names. I've just told them how I've dealt with it. So, getting back to what this is all about, is here we have a movie that is playing at theaters. It's playing in thousands and thousands of theaters. People are going out to it. This movie got a peak in Valentine's Day sale because people went as a romantic movie. Now, I know there's a lot of romantic fantasy in this, but it saddens me that a lot of people are writing it off as it's not that important. It's just a fluff piece. And although this movie doesn't analyze abuse the way maybe other movies have, okay, it still does more to put it out there. That instead of just writing this man off as, oh, he's a sexual pervert because he ties women up and he likes to spank them and do things with them. This movie I reveled in because I saw so many similarities to me and Mr. Grey. In fact, I think Christian Grey is now one of my characters I most like. Recently on Facebook, they asked to pick 3 movie characters that you think make up you. I picked Willy Wonka, I picked Kira from Xanadu, and I picked Tyler Durden from Fight Club. I'm now thinking Christian Grey is either my 4th or would replace Tyler Durden. I'm learning a little bit about it. And it's sad that I'm watching this movie wanting to know what's next for Christian Grey, and other people are writing it as nothing. There are actually people on YouTube that are reviewing this movie who never saw the first movie and are actually not talking about lack of chemistry or the fact that S&M is not being dealt with in a proper way when this movie isn't even about that. It really pisses me off because we are, again, every time I think we have made segues. I remember Oprah talking to Tyler Perry in the episode where he came out saying that he was sexually abused when he was a kid. And they had the audience filled with people, sexually abused men, and they all stood up and everybody was crying and applauding their bravery. And now I see a movie that's, it might not be Shakespeare or Oscar worthy, but this movie deals with bigger issues. The movie Spotlight won Best Picture last year, I believe, or the year before. Anyhow, it was Hollywood saying we look at it, but this movie was all about the journalism that talked about it. They never dealt with what the victims deal with. They dealt with the fact that the church was hiding all this stuff, because that makes a better story than a boy was diddled. It's a bad thing when any child is diddled. But the truth of the matter is here now, people aren't getting it. People try to tell me, I can't believe you like 50 Shades. I ask them, have you even seen it? They say no. And I go, no, we're not talking about anything. I am actually shutting them down. I'm doing it for me and Christian Grey. And yes, I know Christian Grey is only a fake character in a book. But to me, he has taken on a life because he represents things I understand. It saddens me that we live in a world where they let anyone pretty much review movies. They let me. Come on, I don't have anything. But I have a little bit more cred than a lot of people because I have had a whole life of watching movies, and not just certain ones. I constantly see people that watch only action films and then they go to see a comedy and then they review it saying, well, it's not my cup of tea kind of thing. I've seen comedies, I've seen dramas, I've seen horrors, musicals, science fiction, crap cult films. No, I haven't studied. But you know what? In my spare time, I watch documentaries about movies. I watch things. Movies are important to me, and I hate that we live in a generation where movies are just thrown as nothing. You know how I can tell? Things like Netflix. We used to go to the movies, and we used to share that experience of being in the theater. Then our love of movies continued when VHS started. We can now take our favorite movies home. When prices went down, we actually got to take maybe not our favorite movies home. We took chances on movies, invited friends to watch them with us. Then DVD, Blu-ray came, and people constantly still go to the movies. They say that when times are bad, and now with Donald Trump here, people are worrying about everything. So movies are going to probably spike this summer because people tend to go to the movies for escapism. But now with Netflix, you pay just a small sum, and you can watch any of the movies that you want. I'm sure people are freezing it. I'm sure people are texting through it, maybe talking on the phone through them. And then what they do is they basically go and they basically talk to people about, oh, I didn't like that movie. Then suddenly that person says, well, I don't think I'll see that movie because of the fact that somebody told me it was crap. Not people that paid for it and sat in a theater and really watched it, but people literally that just may have watched parts of it. But now they let everyone review movies that way. And the sad part is people buy into it. Hell, I always stress that you can listen to my reviews, but please judge them for yourself because we don't see eye to eye all the time. We may love one movie, but there could be another movie we don't. And I don't tell everybody they should go see 50 Shades of Grey. But what I do tell people is if you have the job of reviewing it, why don't you take in consideration that this movie might have something? So when you give it a 0, that's your consensus. But the truth of the matter is there is a subplot of a man who was seduced, as a child. He was physically beaten as a child, and you write it off as 0? That's like, hey, you know what? Your life doesn't mean anything. But I can guarantee you, if Anastasia Steele was the one who was the abuse victim, and I hope I'm not spoiling too much there, but I assume if you've seen it, you probably already went already. But if she was the abuse victim, and if she truly was the victim in all this, which she isn't in any way, shape, form, this movie would have been touted as, oh my God, look at her overcoming her fears. But because it's a guy again, we're thrown into the whole fluff piece. Not important, not at all. And I admit, it's not going to win any awards and it's not great. But you know what? The fact that it brings light that some people might be a little messed up because of abuse, that should at least get a glimmer of something mentioned in its review or something mentioned in the people that see it. All I ever heard about 50 Shades is the erotica. All I ever heard is the people who read the book was the awakening of Anastasia Steele, how it was Twilight, fake stories of Twilight, I can't remember the word, that was, used as erotica. Nobody ever mentioned to me that Christian Grey may be going through some shit. And by the second movie, as I said, I'll give my full review next week. You start seeing signs of how he wants to change his life, but he's not sure how. And I'm sure by the third one, I'm not sure how it's going to go, but I have a feeling it's going to have a happy ending. A lot of people don't get that happy ending. And sadly, a lot of boys don't get that happy ending because it's still not taken seriously. Oprah may use it as a award-winning moment. And it might have inspired people. I'm not putting it down. It may have inspired people to come out and talk about it. And I may be looked at as a coward for not talking about it, but that's my choice. A lot of women are always sexually abused and they keep quiet. And when they finally come out, like when another group comes, like when Cosby was found and one person came out, suddenly there's 25 people that come out. And they're, cherished in bravery that they finally came out. But that doesn't happen when guys come out. They're looked upon a little less. And I'm sorry if you say otherwise, but it's true. We live in a society where boys don't matter. I hate to bring up circumcision again, but we actually live in a world where boys are told that you are not perfect when you come out. There's been so much health debunked that if you take care of a circumcised penis, it's not going to get infected. You clean it the right way, it's all good. Circumcision should be a decision a man makes for himself. But no, we live in a society that already says, oh my God, what a beautiful little boy. Let's hack him up. That's what it is. That is what it is. So you expect me to come out and openly talk about this because it's going to make things? I'll talk to this to people who I think should. No. But I'm not going to use this as my thing. Because why? Because of the fact that it is not going to make a difference. Because boys don't matter. We continually teach that. We are always looked at as the oppressors. And even new generations are being groomed in a way that if you show any signs of manliness, you must be an awful person. Oh my God, this kid wants to hunt? What a horrible person he is. Anyhow, I'm getting way off topic. This comes back to 50 Shades of Grey, a movie playing currently in your movie houses that's being dismissed as nothing but fluff. And yet a subplot that means the world to me, and I'm sure a lot of other men who are secretly watching that, even ones that were probably forced to it by their girlfriends, not realizing that they were going to come face to face with something they never thought they'd have to think about again. And if they didn't think about it or are thinking about it now, well, good, you should think about it. Because nobody else in the world is. That's why it's being written off as nothing. And that saddens me. So if you start talking about 50 Shades of Grey and you write it off as a piece of shit, I'm going to stop you. We can talk about any movie and disagree about anything. But don't you ever tell me that a movie that deals with a topic that just because the topic is pushed aside in the background isn't important. I'm not going to have that. I will stand up for me, the Christian Greys of the world. And this movie got me to talk about things I did not want to ever talk about on this radio show. So if that doesn't tell you how important this is to me, I don't know what will. Anyhow, that being said, this movie is helping me. I'm starting to learn ways to deal with it, even though I already felt I already have. I'm starting to get aspects of the world, and whether it's reading people better, or admitting to me that I know people, or whether it's seeing something from a movie that other people don't find important, I learn from things. And that's what we're here on this earth, to learn from things. And to me, it's amazing when I go to a movie that I'm expecting is just going to be like just some minor entertainment. But it gets me thinking, and it gets my blood pumping to the point that I need to talk about this. That's the wonderful thing about life. You just never know when you're going to turn that corner and be face to face with something that you're learning about, or something you want to learn more about. And whether it's reading people, whether it's checking out an old movie. You never know where that next lesson in life is going to be. I've rambled on for much too long. I hope you have yourself a wonderful day. Thank you for pressing play. You do not know how much that means to me. And I'll be back next week with a brand new show.